Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, where we like to talk about tools or tech every Tuesday, and some YouTuber or random content creator that I think might be worth following on Fridays. Today, I thought we'd talk about, out of all the Apple products that I use and own, out of all the Apple products that I've owned over the years, what is my biggest gripe? What is the thing that I think is the worst about using Apple products? Let's talk about it. So usually the first thing that I hear people complain about Apple is that it's too expensive. But I give them a pass on that because there are Android phones that are just as expensive, and there are also, in the PC world, there are computers that are just as expensive as a MacBook or a Mac Pro. And if you're not a tech person and you're thinking, well, why would I pay $1,000 for a phone? Well, just think of all the things that you can do with that iPhone that you would have had to carry around in the past. In the 90s or the early 2000s, just think about all the different things. Depending on the era, you would have had to take around a Walkman, you'd have to take around a calculator, you'd have to take around a video camera, a regular camera, a phone. You wouldn't even have a phone, you have to go to a payphone and hope that you have change in your pocket. For that Walkman, you'd have to have like a whole load of tapes. You'd have to have a backpack worth of tapes to have a fraction of what you can fit on a modern phone. The modern phone can not only fit all those songs right on it, but it can also access unlimited songs from all kinds of music services that you have instant access to. You can be on a road trip, you don't have to stop at a store, you can just download the song and listen to it right then and there. Some people still like to carry around a pen and paper, but you know what? When you're like me and you have scribble and you have bad eyesight, it's nice to be able to just type out a note on your phone and later on be able to enlarge it or email it off to somebody or text it to somebody. You don't have to get out your note, try to figure out what you wrote, and then type it out or whatever. You can just go ahead and immediately copy and paste, send it to somebody. Your phone also takes the place of a TV. Remember those little TVs that, well, at the time they were little, but it was like the size of a shoebox or something it looked like in the ads. I never had one. They were expensive. And you wouldn't be able to get, the screen would be like this big. You wouldn't be able to get hardly any channels. You'd have to rely on whatever you could get over the air at the time. And you know what? If you didn't want to watch Wheel of Fortune, well, too bad, because that's what was on. We can't forget that these things are also computers, and you can get a lot of work done even just on a phone now. You can dictate a letter that you need to type up right on your phone. You don't have to have special software. It just comes with it. And you can hit the button, start talking. You do have to put in the punctuation by saying period and things like that. But other than that, it works pretty well. It's also cool that you can access the world's knowledge right in the palm of your hands just by going to something like Google or Yahoo or Bing or whatever. And I think it's cool that you don't have to get to a phone, you just have your phone with you. So yes, $1,000 is a lot of money. It is to me too, so don't get me wrong. However, think about the fact that if you compare it to a car, which just because it's bigger, you would think that a car at $1,000 would be a cheap car. However, it only does one thing. You get a lot of utility out of these phones. And if you are a person that needs the features that these phones offer, it's worth the money. If you don't, I can understand why you'd get a cheaper phone. But I don't fault Apple for charging for the research and development, the cost of manufacturing and shipping and everything that they need to put those features in the phones. It's amazing. If you compare what comes in these phones and what is in a comparably priced laptop, you'd be really surprised. The phones are actually fairly reasonable. So my biggest complaint isn't the price, and it's not the fact that they took out the headphone jack, because even though I don't like that, I thought it was very convenient to have the headphone jack. And now I have to have this stupid little dongle just to be able to plug in a normal set of headphones. I don't I'm not one of these people that thinks that it's going to sound better if the headphone jack had been built right in, because at some point the digital to analog conversion has to happen, and to me it doesn't matter if it's in the phone or outside of the phone, it's still happening. And to me it's just the fact that I have to have some stupid dongle to plug in, and if I lose it I gotta buy another one. So it's not the price, and it's not the lack of the headphone jack, and it's not the lack of USB-C, the fact that they've got lightning ports instead of USB-C ports in the iPhone. I think that would be better at this point. However, I can't fault Apple, because at the time when they brought out the lightning port, they needed something to replace the 30-pin adapter that they had, that huge thing that they were using for a long time on the iPods. And the USB-C just wasn't mature at that time. And so they needed something that was better than what they had and what was out there at the time. And the lightning port was better than what was out there at the time. But now they need to update to USB-C. But I don't blame them for putting it on there in the first place. And my biggest complaint is not the walled garden approach, which has been going on for decades, starting with their computers and now with their phones. Critics say that the walled garden approach stifles innovation. But on the flip side, I understand the benefit of owning everything from start to finish. So in the past, and to some degree in the present still, if you are using another operating system such as Linux or Windows, and you choose to buy a component and stick it in there or attach it to your computer, you don't know for sure that it has been tested to be 100% compatible with all of the different components that are in your computer. Now, on the Mac side, they claim that they have more control over being able to test those things. So you buy a CD-ROM drive for your computer in the 90s, and it was a Mac. It was something that was made for Apple, and even though it cost more, you knew pretty much that it was going to work with that computer. Fast forward to modern days, if you have an Android phone, you can download an app, and it may not function correctly on your phone. Your phone may not have the components that it needs or the resources that it needs to be able to function properly, and it may not even function at all. On the Apple side, if you download an app, you have a reasonable amount of confidence that Apple has tested, because they make the operating system and they make the devices, and they only have a limited number of devices that they have to test for. Now, that's not to say that there aren't bugs, but they do a pretty good job of making sure that there's no viruses and no issues with it working on your particular phone. So it's kind of nice for people who aren't very tech savvy to have that degree of confidence that they can just go ahead, download the app, and just start using it. Also, it might stifle creativity, but Apple does enforce some type of uniformity with the user interface, which can make a difference for people who aren't tech savvy. So I can't say that I blame Apple for wanting to control the whole user experience, because can you imagine if you bought a brand new car and you took it to the Chevy dealership and they say, no, sorry, you gotta take that to the fuel pump manufacturer, and the fuel pump manufacturer says, no, sorry, you got to take that to the fuel injector manufacturer because the fuel injectors are the problem. And then so the fuel injector manufacturer says, no, nope, it's the fuel line, sorry, you got to take it to them. And so you take it to them and they say, no, clearly the problem is the fuel filter, you got to go to that company. So then you go to that company and they say, no, sorry, nothing wrong with this, you got to go back to GM, or you got to go do whatever, and you just keep on getting the runaround. That'd be a horrible experience. But instead, you take it to the dealership, they take ownership, and they say, okay, let us check it out, we'll figure out what's wrong, and we'll give you a call. And then they fix it. If you're having a house built, a good contractor is going to make sure that the electrician does their job, the plumber does their job, and everyone else does their job. You can't blame Apple for wanting to provide the same type of peace of mind and smooth transaction. I'm not saying that it's always that smooth, but that's the idea behind doing it that way. So even though I'm a tech guy and I like to tinker, I don't blame Apple for taking this approach. I find it annoying that Apple doesn't allow call recording apps in the App Store. If you download a call recording app, it calls, and then you call out from that service, and that service records the call for you, and then that recording has to be sent to you. They can charge you for it. On Android, you can just download a call recording app and be done with it. Now, I understand that it's not legal in every place, but it's legal in a lot of states, including mine, and I think that there's a lot of legitimate uses for recording your calls. You might have a business partner where you're planning on doing something, and or maybe you need to get a loan from a bank, and you're talking to the loan officer and they're saying you're going to need your W-2s and some pay stubs and blah 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 blah, and instead of having you have to say wait a minute, let me find a pen, let me find a paper, you can just say to yourself, okay, the call is being recorded, I can go back and listen to the recording later to refresh my memory on what I need and make sure that I have everything available for that person. So I find it really annoying that Apple doesn't allow that, but that's not my main gripe. That's not the worst thing about using an Apple device. And finally on this list, it's not the lack of an EQ everywhere system-wide that you can use and change and customize and have it affect everything that you're listening to, whether you're using Google Music, Amazon Music, Apple Music, whatever. I mean, come on, Apple. This was done by Winamp in the late 90s on PCs. I know this is possible because if you jailbreak your phone, there's an app called EQ Everywhere, which lets you customize things, and I would like to be able to say, oh, you know what? When I'm listening to this song or this genre or this playlist, I want to be able to adjust my music this way. The way it is right now, Apple says, what are you listening to? And you say, rock. And it says, this is how you like it. No, that may not be how I like it. So even though I do have this complaint about Apple, Android has it too. And so it's like, come on guys, come on Apple, come on Google, just give us a customizable EQ already. And before I get the Apple fanboys just hating in the comments, you're just stupid. Apple can do no wrong. Ba 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 ba. I just want to say that there are definitely things about Google that I don't like and drawbacks to being in the Android ecosystem. Also, there are a lot of great things about owning an Apple device, and particularly owning multiple Apple devices, because one of those things that is so great is that they work together really well. If you have a iPhone, an iPad, an Apple Watch, a MacBook, all of these things can interact really well. You can send one thing from another. You can have a web browser open in your phone and go to your iPad, go to your computer. You can send and receive iMessages from your computer, from your iPad, and from your phone. I think that kind of stuff is great. You can airdrop files from one to the other. Android is finally adding a similar feature, and AirDrop has been out for years. On top of all that, and all the things that I mentioned earlier, I always seem to have a pretty good experience with their customer service. They're always really friendly to me, and they always do their best to get me a good resolution to my issue. So the number one issue that I have with Apple is the way that they kill the performance of your phone or your device when it gets older. And they claim that it's to extend your battery life. But you know what? I'd rather have a usable iPad for 8 hours than an unusable iPad that stays charged for 12 hours. Right now, my iPhone wants me to update, and I don't want to do it because I updated my iPad, and it is now painfully, really painfully slow. It reminds me of the days when my computer used to have to use the telephone line to screech at another computer to get me a web page, and you would hit the button to connect, you'd come back 10 minutes later after taking a nap and find that your computer had dropped the call. And now I hit the button, open the app or the game, and it takes a while. And when it does come up, it's really jumpy. And now, a lot of the times, when I tap the icon and wait the process out, the app finally comes up and it crashes. And I gotta tap the icon again and wait for that app to come up again. So I can't say with 100% certainty that this isn't just a bug, that this isn't just an intentional thing that Apple has done to extend my battery life, but we do know that Apple has said in the past that they will purposefully clock down your processor to extend your battery life. And this isn't the first time that I've had this happen with updates, including other devices. You wouldn't say, well, this truck is too heavy, we need to cut it in half and then have 2 wheels and the rest dragging on the ground. You wouldn't say, well, it's going to take too much energy to carry these clothes around, so I'm going to rip my shirt in half and tear off one of my pant legs, and then I'm going to pack. You wouldn't say, well, it's going to be a little bit too much work to carry this window home, so I'm just going to get a smaller window. Well, you know what? You're going to still have a gaping hole where the smaller window doesn't fit the bigger hole, and it's not going to be functional. So they already have an optional low battery mode. So why don't they just extend that out to people when your battery gets old and is no longer holding as much of a charge? Let the user decide. Slide a slider or some other type of way of deciding how much battery life you want versus performance. Because personally, I'd rather have a little more performance and have to plug my phone in a little bit sooner. And that is my biggest gripe about Apple, because you could purchase a product, use it for a couple years, be perfectly happy with it, and then an update comes out and all of a sudden you are no longer happy with the performance of it. And I think you should just have that choice. So I hope you found something useful in this video. Drop me a comment and let me know what you want to see on this channel. Thanks so much for hanging out for another Tools and Tech Tuesday. See you next time. Some random YouTuber or content creator that I think is might screwed that up. Fridays. Today I thought we'd talk about the critics say hinders. Oh no. Well, guess I gotta change that thing. Alright. Innovation. But is Linux or Windows, and somewhat still in the future. So even though I'm a Tab, I don't even know what a Tab is. You can get an app called EQ Anywhere or EQ Everywhere. I don't remember. I think it's EQ Everywhere. I should double check. And drawbacks to being almost had it. I don't like, and there are definitely drawbacks to being in the Android one that you want and how much battery life you want, and let the chooser. Drop me a comment and let me know what you want to see in this video. Too late, I already recorded. It went amp in the late 90s. Oops.